That's what we are. And we are live because that's what the little icon says. Hello, everyone. This is Andy Hall. Believe it or not, I've been able to figure out how to stream onto my personal Facebook account, as well as on my YouTube channel. If you want to comment, though, because I can't see the Facebook comments, if you want to comment and ask Chris a question, then please come to my YouTube channel, Laughing in Disbelief, and you will see this thing streaming live, and put a comment, and we will address the comment, and hopefully we'll give you an intelligent answer. And if not, we'll be funny. And if we can't do any of those things, we'll be sincere at the very least. A little bit about Chris. Chris's podcast, and I'm just going to read this from his site. The name of his podcast is Let's Chat with Chris Revill, is a conversational podcast which has been featured on Vulture, the Rhode Island Monthly, Huffington Post, and has been one of the top 100 comedy podcasts on iTunes. Host Chris seeks out guests who are part of niche cultures, from podcasting, punk rock, film, television, tech, behavioral health, and beyond. Now, the reason why Chris is on the show, besides the fact that Chris is a pretty awesome guy, he hosted this roundtable of podcasters discussing how to monetize your podcast. And you know what? I'm just going to read another couple of sentences to tell you about that conference before we jump in. Ready to take your podcast to the next level? Learn industry secrets from professional podcasters like Daniel Denvir, The Dig, Caitlin Durante, and Jamie Loftus of the Bechdel Cast, Marion Blake Larsen of Marion Blake Media, and the host of PVD's own Spark Up podcast. From building a brand to monetizing the hard work you put into each episode, this virtual panel, moderated by Chris, host of Let's Chat with Chris Revill, will give you the tools you need to level up. Wow, that was a lot, Chris. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. That was thank you for coming and having me on. That was we hosted that with the What's Cheer Writers Club here in Providence. I couldn't thank them enough for giving me that opportunity. The way that actually came together, if anyone's wondering, was I'm a club member. I've had Jody and Jillian, who run the club, on my podcast. That's my studio. Before everything happened, I would record out of there. So I had this idea about moderating like a podcast roundtable on like YouTube, like a Facebook chat, something like that. And then, started doing some thinking, being like, well, who do I know? What can I do? So I reached out to them about doing one about like, hey, let's talk about podcasting during the virus and see how that's affecting the industry. And then it kind of evolved into be like, well, what's something people actually care a little bit more about than like those hot button issues, like you know what I mean? So yeah. It kind of morphed into that. And I have to say, if Shavers, Jody at What Cheers Club was the best safety net, as it was my first time moderating, so I was terrified. And they were such a wonderful support network, and I actually had to go back and listen and watch, which anyone can do. We actually put the audio version of it on the Let's Chat feed, so you can listen to it as the podcast, but it's also on the What's Your YouTube channel as well, if anyone wants to watch. So, and this kind of really leads into what we're gonna talk about today, is how do you monetize, and a lot of it sometimes is just finding a way to put yourself in positions to ask people who are doing what you want things. And this whole panel is kind of like a secret vanity project for me to be like, how do I make money? And I don't know how to ask you these people that without this. And then I gave it to all of you, but it was really for me.
Very good. I want to say hello to people in the chat. Chris from the Daily Atheist Morning Show, which I happen to co-host on Tuesday mornings. Hello, Chris. I'm just going to call Blazing Wizard Pope. Blazing, what's up? And of course, CH2517 Joan, glad for all of you to stop by. So, Chris, in your own words, now I read basically what you wrote about your own podcast, but if we were just hanging out, let's say we're in an elevator and you only have like 5 seconds to tell me about what you do with your podcast, what would you say?
So I would say the short version of that is Let's Chat is the conversational chat where we seek out guests from the worlds of punk rock, podcasting, and pop culture and try to figure out what makes the people who make the art that we love tick. So try to find the people who are making the types of art that we all love, and any involvement, if they're the creators or if they had a small roles in, say, Star Wars, or they're the drummer of the Gaslight Anthem. Like, I want to talk to anyone at any level involved of anything of the things that we all love.
And you have a lot of episodes up, don't you?
Yeah, I one of the best things I've learned is just by the simple fact of just not quitting makes you become like an elder statesman. Like you just go from like doing this thing in your bedroom forever, and then one day you're respected just because you didn't quit when everyone else did. And maybe I should have, but I didn't.
This is fantastic because I've been blogging for well over 10 years.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I feel like I have something to say. If it's nothing else, it's don't quit and keep working.
You don't realize how much like the whole Dunning-Kruger effect. You don't really realize how much you know until you talk to someone who's just starting out or something. Like, oh yeah, not everyone knows what an RSS feed is. Not everyone knows these, like how to edit and like all these just little things you pick up and do on your way for whatever. Like, and I know you're a comedian as well. I feel like podcasting, much like comedy, it's like everyone's going to get into it, but just a few of us are going to stick it out because like a lot of it sucks, and you have to enjoy the parts of it that are better than the stuff that sucks. And like, you know, and no shame. I know many people who started in we call it pod fade. People start 5-10 episodes, they disappear. Totally fine. I respect the fuck out of that. I've quit a million things. Whatever reason, podcast was the thing that just became my addiction. And I can't. I've actually tried to quit multiple times. I can't. It's in my blood at this point.
That's great, dude. That's great. Hey, we got a question from the chat from Chris.
Please read them all out. Thank you.
I will read it. Chris says or asks, I was putting my shows up on Podbean in podcast form because Chris runs a YouTube channel. So he's putting up his shows on Podbean in podcast form. Should he switch over to Spotify?
As a hosting site, I don't recommend anything that you don't own your own content. I don't know Podbean as well. I know there's another one, Anchor, that is really popular that a lot of people are doing, but they just got bought by Spotify. So I host through Libsyn, and with Libsyn is my host site. And then with my Libsyn site, that's like, for those who don't know, it's where you upload your RSS feed that goes to Spotify, that will go to iTunes. You could upload it to YouTube. You do everything. But by doing that through Libsyn, I do pay a fee, but then I own my content. Now, when you host on a site, I don't know Podbean. I can't speak to that as well, but like I know Anchor specifically is free, and they have some advertising tools within it. Anchor just got by Spotify, so there's a lot of like kind of a buzz in the industry, like what is the intellectual properties of your podcast that you host on a free host site that one day, because why can't they just turn around and say we own this? So it hasn't happened. It's definitely a fear for all of us. You should absolutely have all of your stuff on Spotify. Spotify is fucking incredible. If you want to just look in terms of business, besides, if we look past the fact that they spent $100 million on Joe Rogan, perfect example. I love the podcast, An Oral History of the Office. It's a Spotify original. They just put up billboards in Times Square in New York City. So we're seeing real advertising dollars going into podcasting in different formats because Apple has just ignored it the whole time. They really just didn't do any, which is kind of great. So I absolutely think you should get your stuff on Spotify, but host your stuff through a source that you can use where you will own your stuff. So I host on Libsyn, and then I get that will post right to my Spotify automatically, and all my sources all in one shot. It's the best tool.
I want to say hello to Paul Camish, who's in the chat too. How you doing, Paul? So yeah, dude, I'm terrified at the idea of not owning my own content that I create.
Yeah, it's one of those things that also might not be anything. It could just be the boogeyman that everyone's afraid of, but it's just a risk. So for me, it's just like I want to. That was actually the advice we got from Blake and Mary from Mary and Blake Media Company, and I happen to have Libsyn, so it worked out good for me. The club I did this is based in Rhode Island, so that's why so many of our podcasters were Rhode Island based. If anyone's out there like, and then we decided to have some people from Los Angeles who were people I'd known from some years back who are doing the Bechdel Cast, and they're on like iHeartRadio now. They got kind of wrapped up. Their network they were on How Stuff Works, and then they got wrapped up into podcasts. Like all industries, every company just gets bought.
No, I know that you and I we've chatted about this before, but what's the organization in Providence that you work with? That you work with? They offer space. They offer. Tell me more about that.
Oh, that's the Watch Cheers Writers Club. That's who I moderated this panel with. They are just the most wonderful organization. It is like a co-working space for when things were not like this. It's really a great hub for writers, podcasters. They do like screenwriters and kind of an umbrella of the creative arts community. It's a super low price to be like just a member. There's a very small price to be a member. And then that gave me access to rent the studio. The networking alone, and when we can have live in-person events. They have a great online community now they're doing. They have all these virtual, they're very active on Slack, tons and tons and tons of workshops geared to writing, podcasting. And they happen to, people who run it just happen to be like the loveliest, sweetest, most like, and besides, once we can physically go in the building again for safety reasons, it's the most beautiful space you've ever been to. It's so gorgeous. I had gotten invited for the podcast studio opening on Instagram. So like, I had never been. And I felt so out of place. I am not a writer. I'm not, and it's Providence. So, we have Brown University and a lot of academia. And the Writers Club is a perfect mix of people like me. And then I've been there and having a conversation. And it's like, oh yes, I just retired from the Globe, or I've retired from the Times, or you're literally talking to Pulitzer Prize winners and like famous people. And then me. And then even my father-in-law, who's a job having normal guy, loves sci-fi. He's part of a virtual sci-fi writing group every Sunday. So it literally for everyone, and it's so much fun because sometimes you're talking to someone who is like very well known in their field, and for me, that field isn't mine, but it's nice. It's kind of cool. But then it's so much fun. I can't recommend it enough. It's a great way, especially now when we need to have more connection to community. And they're putting all these wonderful tools out there. Like they have a podcast one-on-one class. They have a podcast editing workshop. They have my knowledge of it tends to be podcasts, but they do a lot of stuff with more like literary and screenwriting and a lot of other stuff as well.
I imagine that there are other centers like that in other major cities in America or everywhere.
When I interviewed them for my second 100 episode, that were my big 200, I had asked them, and it sounds like there's versions of this, but this one seems to be pretty unique because it's also a co-working space. So I don't use it. I have an office job, but it does kind of seem like a little bit of the way of the future for people. I think they have a funny thing. It's like a club for introverts essentially. I'm always the loudest one there when I walk in. I walk in the studio, I'm like, hey everyone! Everyone's like in a library. I'm like,
that's great, dude. That's great. So, one of the main topics that people talked about in the conference, in the roundtable, is finding a niche for your podcast. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, and this has been between this conference I just got to moderate, which was so wonderful. I've also simultaneously been taking a class through PRX, which is based out of Boston. There's the PRX Sound School. I think there's one in DC. I believe it has some affiliate to NPR. I want to say I've been to the garage in Boston, and one of the great things about podcasting is different from other mediums, and same with YouTube as well, is you don't actually need million people to make a dime. Like you can just have 10 or 20 followers. Maybe that's a little bit low, but you could have a small audience that could have some real staying power. And we can speak to that a little bit later about what you want once you kind of get that. But yeah, a lot of I like to, so between the class and the panel, a lot about it is it's about finding your audience, but by not just doing the annoying thing where you just go into a bunch of groups and stuff and spam people, about creating genuine, authentic connections with people who are making things that you like. And that's how your audience grows. I mean, besides the marketing and anything you could do, the best way to get a new listener, the best way to get someone onto your team is doing something like this. It's cross promotion. It's not going to be the billboard in Times Square, which none of us are going to get anytime soon. It comes down to a friend telling a friend. And what's great about podcasting, the way it started was with, iTunes. I think they acquired it essentially for the iPod and then did nothing with it. So there was no central figurehead. So the entire podcast community is, and very much my understanding of the YouTube community, very much of it's almost like kind of like I would say if like an 80s surf movie of locals only. We're not mean to people coming in, but like if you're going to come into our community, you need to offer something other than like, check out my podcast, and I think that's how you find your audience is like, I say, make the show you want to make, and then figure out, well, where do these people hang out online? Like Reddit is a great resource. Social media is a great resource. Also don't ever don't ever laugh at like local, like the biggest like successes I've had is like I've gotten some write-ups in the local paper versus national paper. And that's where I've seen the biggest numbers, the biggest jumps. The smaller the audience is where the biggest things tend to happen. So it's really just like, anyone interested can hit me up after the show. I've gotten these great these things from my class, from our teacher, about basically you get to make an audience profile. It's really fun. And you just kind of like, who is my listener? And really, it's a simple thing of just sitting down, like, who's my listener and where would they hang out? And then you literally go to figure out where they hang out. And it's so much fun.
You know, you raise a couple of really great points here, is that you have to be passionate about the topic you're going to be engaging in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because it's your time at the end of the day. Like, I don't host a political podcast because why I find politics are important. It's not the passion that I like to talk about all the time. I like, perfect example. This has nothing. This is the kind of person I am. I have a little Darkwing Duck toy on my desk.
That's great.
Love Darkwing Duck. I've gotten to interview the creator of Darkwing Duck. Of course, that doesn't mean anything to anyone, but to me, it was important because this is what I did in my free time before that interview. And that's what's so important, is because I'm going to watch 90s cartoons. And maybe you're not, but it means the world to me. So, of course, I want to talk about them. You know, like, you got to put a lot of work into it. So I think starting at the basis of doing the thing you actually want to talk about, because if you're just talking to someone, people sense that shit a mile away. People love authenticity, especially in our communities and YouTube, podcasting, these like more like new media where it's a little more consumer creative based. Like, we don't want that. Like, I don't want to watch a Jimmy Fallon interview. I want Joe Rogan, or I want Marin or Aisha Tyler or someone like that.
Yeah. I want a Marin. I want someone who is engaged and someone who is excited about the person that they're talking to and about the subject that they're talking about.
Yeah, bonus points that they're in recovery.
What's that?
Bonus points that they're in recovery.
Oh, right.
Are by like a lot of people in recovery tend to be like recovering in recovery. So bonus points.
Well, yeah, this is true. And finding out what people want to listen to, it's weird, right? So you find maybe a broad topic that you want to talk about, and then you look at your analytics, right, to see what actually works and what doesn't work and what resonates with the crew of people that are watching.
Oh yeah, and then I had this. I don't know if this is the right or wrong thing to do, but I had this kind of fuck you DIY approach for up until pretty recently, and kind of still do. And sometimes my producers are like, "Yeah, tone it down a little." Where I'm always like, "Well, I make this for me," but also maybe you need to realize, like, well, people are being very kind to you, so maybe you should to listen. One great way to find your audience at any stage is doing an audience survey. Like, you know, your best thing is just ask, because you don't know who's going to listen to you. Your data can only tell you so much, and and especially you could, you know, numbers can be tweaked with and toyed with. There's some resources like Chartable. It's really great where they give you more accurate data through the IAB, which is that International Accounting of Business. Libsyn also has one too, where they have the Libsyn stats, then they have the IAB ones, which are the ones that like sponsorships and marketers will look after, which those numbers are generally significantly lower, but that's because there's less bots essentially.
Right.
But like, you know, you find you can just do that. And then I want to say Reddit has been one of the, well, look, perfect example. I don't know, just because it's in front of me, like this little Darkwing Duck toy. Oh, you know, another thing I have in front of me. I had just actually bought this through a Facebook group. So I had chatted with the bassist of a band I love called Streetlight Manifesto, which is like a pretty good sized niche band. And I found this Facebook group on called Friends of Streetlight Manifesto, and it is the nicest group of people I've ever come in contact with. And that's the perfect example of finding your audience. I happened to talk to someone in this band, and then I went out and ended up finding their fandom. But I didn't just show up like, hey guys, I just talked to Pete, which, you know, I definitely did that. But I interact. I love Streetlight Manifesto. I have their albums. I've seen them in concert. And then I kind of built up all these little friendships, and I saw my numbers like skyrocket from that. And hopefully those are people that if you have a Patreon, or you have a simple way for people to give you money or merchandise, it's kind of like there's just that way of doing it. So like the podcast is the thing you do for free, and the work is everything else, is like finding a revenue stream from that.
Right. Yeah, because what I found interesting, shifting gears a little bit, was there was this discussion about promoting your podcast, right?
It's the worst.
And it's the worst because most of us get into this because we want to just talk with people through purely selfish reasons. Maybe, you know, I do this because I like to talk to people and I want to learn stuff.
Yeah, same here.
You know, that's what I'm interested in. But there was this really good discussion in the roundtable about if you don't make a good product, it doesn't matter how much you promote it.
And so I can speak to this as a fan of growing up in the music scene. I have been to a lot of concerts in my life, I'm sure you have as well, where you've gone there and that band has a song on the radio, and they're like the it thing of like the corporate rock station, and then like sometimes back in the day, radio stations would put on these concerts with bands like wouldn't make sense. But like I can't recall, but I remember going to like the Webster in Hartford, Connecticut, and I think it was like Glassjaw was the headliner with like some radio band that didn't make, like, it might have been Raw or something like that. Or no, the band was called, actually they're so forgettable. They're called Generation. They like had a song on the radio. They had a billboard. Exactly. They were on a major label. They had all the money. Not a single person was there. Like literally, it was an empty venue. And then I've literally gone to punk shows that are sold out that like no one's ever heard that band because like they had the street team flyering up and they were as part of the community. And you know, I think that's same with podcasting, right? Like if you make a podcast that you yourself don't like, or even sounds good, or even continues, I mean, I won't go on, and I wouldn't say I'm less likely to guest on a podcast first episode versus their 20th. Hell, I don't really want to listen to a podcast if it's like a first episode of something. Like you want to know it's going to stick around.
Yeah. And the thing is, you will talk to people who do stand-up comedy or, you know, other creative types, and they will be, when they're honest, they will say within the first year, I really sucked at what I did.
I would say the first 5 years, many years. I don't think I don't feel like I found my voice until about a year ago. But that's a tough one because I also know like there are people who like stuff about the show like in the early episodes that I did not like. So I know not that they're bad. It's just I listen to them like, oh, I could have done better.
Right. With age, with experience, you get to look back and you see all the missed opportunities you had in those interviews.
You just don't realize it and stuff like that. And you know, it's funny because like your marketing is so important, but also not important, because if you're marketing a shit sandwich,
this is true. And let's face it, one of the themes that was this roundtable was that word of mouth marketing is the best type of marketing.
It's literally everything. I think that's why advertisers and the industry as a whole has been a little bit slower to grow, because it's like the people at the top of the different industries coming into podcasting now are coming from like, I'm going to guess like music industry, television, like just different fields. They don't fully get it. And like your dollars, like your social, the dollars into it, that I don't think they were seeing the ROI immediately on it, because I mean, I'm a podcast listener, but if I saw a billboard for a podcast, I'm probably not going to think twice. But if I see Laughing Disbelief had a guest on, which I've watched your YouTube show many times, I'm more likely to go follow that guest, become a fan, donate to Patreon, buy the merch. You know what I mean? It's I don't know what it is, but you know, I guess those quick flash in the pans of a billboard don't work for me. This is what it is. Or like if someone I know or someone I like sends me someone. I mean, I found podcasts from my brother, and that's like, you know, think of all the money that could have been spent to try to get this guy to get into it. And it was just my brother texting me, hey, check out this Nerdist podcast. Seems pretty cool. Like 11 years ago or whatever it was.
Right. You know, one of the tips that one of the podcasters gave is don't spam your fans. Don't spam your friends. Don't spam your family with your links or with information about your podcast.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, your friends probably don't give a shit. And I actually think in the beginning, and I felt that kind of freeing when I first kind of got to a point. Like I first started, I think everyone was listening because it was like everyone at work's like, oh, you're talking about it, you're doing this. I started with someone I worked with at the time, and it was this cool thing. But a few episodes in, people kind of gave up, and which is great. And then like even like you get to a point, your parents stop listening, and then you get this freedom to be like, oh, I can kind of be a little more vulnerable or say that story or say that thing. And you know, it's like pushing boundaries if you figure out what you can and can't say on the air and who gets mad at what and what you want to give of yourself. But yeah, there's a freeing aspect to be like, oh yeah, no one in my life actually cares about this. Not that they don't care, not that they're not supportive, but they don't listen to every episode. And I kind of prefer it that way because I want to be able to say what I want to say without having to answer to like someone.
Exactly. And that's what, when I do give advice about doing creative work, whether it's blogging, YouTubing, whatever, you know, I was doing a podcast for quite a while. Sure. I'll continue my monologue, is that most of your friends and family will not be your fans. Your fans, if there's going to be a Venn diagram, there'll be friends and family over here and your fans over here, and there may be a small overlap, but do not expect there to be a large one.
Sorry about that.
No worries, man.
I thought kid related, but everything's okay.
This is life, and this is live TV, or it's live streaming, or whatever we're doing. It's live, and life is messy.
Especially when you're quarantining at home with a 3-year-old.
Okay, we're going to talk about quarantining in like maybe 15 minutes because I'm intrigued about the whole journey that you're on. Because I had a quarantine too for a little while. It was work related. We both work in behavioral health for all intents and purposes. Yep. Okay, so let's talk about developing relationships when promoting your or just developing relationships in general, because from what I understand, from what I heard, is that you're not only developing relationships between you and the audience, you're developing relationships with other creatives within your clique, as well as relationships with potential sponsors too.
Yeah, and that is the part I think it can some personalities and myself earlier in the days, it could feel dirty, like you're just trying to get to know someone for a certain reason. And that's never how I viewed it. Like, at least for my approach for the whole time has always just been like, maybe it's even more gross. It's just been like, let's be friends. Like, it's come from a very genuine place, but there's also some benefits to that too. So and when the people say develop relationships, it really means find people that you like to work with. And maybe that, like this, like, we met doing a podcast in 2016, and now we're still working together because you find people you just want to spend your time with. And if you're really lucky, if the cards stack up, you make a relationship and maybe that person skyrockets off and maybe you're still friendly and they can kind of pull you up. And podcasting, I can't even tell you the community around it. Like, I could never get where I were without the Potter and family community, which is how we met, has been. Yeah. I've met so many people now. It's all these years later of guests I've had on or people I've met and have gone on and given opportunities and back and forth. And I can give a perfect example. This is all the stuff I just happen to have on my desk, but I want to shout out this guy again. My buddy Sean Cologne made this documentary called The Fat Wreck. He was promoting it about 5 years ago on Kickstarter. And I was like, all right, cool. Did a podcast together because the documentary sounded really, really incredible. Yeah, became Facebook friends, just kind of stayed in touch here and there. Turned out we had some mutual friends. He just came back to do the podcast again to promote his new documentary. He's now making a podcast. And so when we interviewed, he was just crowd surfing for a documentary that was maybe going to come out. Turned out Fat Wreck did really well, and it's incredible. Sean's now making a documentary called Age of Audio about podcasting, which is literally Ira Glass, Roman Mars, everyone big in the whole industry. He's the guy who's making the documentary about the field I happen to be into. I didn't develop that relationship because I was like, one day Sean Cologne's going to do something for me. He was making something I liked. Turned out we had very similar personalities, and now like I would call him an actual friend, like, Yeah. And we work together sometimes, and that's what a developed relationship is. Just genuinely finding people that you doing the things you want to do, and then the ideas that, as the creative energy starts to flow, and it's the best. And that's what I think develop a relationship really means. And when people notice it, that's when sponsors, that's where people donate, that's where merch, that's where all that great stuff kind of can start to come in.
Right. I have to tell you, the people that I have on the YouTube channel are typically people that would pass if you're in Boston, if you're in the area, and if you need a guest room, if you need a place to crash, to stay, then you can feel free. You're welcome.
Yes. It's very punk rock. Podcasting and YouTube, it's very punk rock. It's a lot of like Sleep on My Floor, or like one of the examples I will have to share forever. I'm so grateful for is David LaFierre and his wife Julia Miranda. They have the podcast The Unwritable Rant. They were booking like celebrities early on, and they're everyone's like, David, how the fuck do you do that? Like, they had like Eric Roberts and Don McLean, and they've had a lot of bigger names. I don't know why those were the first two that came to my mind. And unlike other industries, it wasn't a trade secret. David goes online, makes a YouTube video, which anyone can look up right now, and just made a YouTube video. Is like, here's exactly how you ask how you do booking. He made a video, he made a template and gave it to everyone because his wife worked in PR for years and years. And that's podcasting. And that's like, you shouldn't give that away. And that's what's so great about it. It's like, I think it's that stronger together thing. I'm kind of relating it to, like, I've been watching The Last Dance, the documentary about the Bulls. The last season, really great. And the whole Phil Jackson thing is like, even though Jordan was the best player in the world, they didn't get better until he started leaning in on his teammates. And that's when they won. And that's right. No matter how big you get, you share, you help everyone out, you give out those trade secrets, because that one's doing nothing for him. Because the better my show does, and we've cross promoted, the better I do, the better he does. The better he does, the better I do. We all lift each other up. No, that's great advice, dude. I want to say hello to some of the people in the chat. Neil, the 604 Atheist, is here. Julia, the voice, and Edward. And I always mispronounce this, Edward, whenever I see your name. I want to pronounce it Chirac. But I know that's not the proper way, or maybe it is, but I'm going to give you apologies because I'm very good at apologizing since I have a black belt in making mistakes. That's what I have. So how do you find sponsors, dude? How does that work? That's the tough one. I'm also learning that right now. So I actually have written this part down. So there's two different ways people kind of go about sponsorship within the industry. It's called CPM, cost per mile, and which I found Milli, M-I-L-L-E, which is Latin for 1,000. So sponsorship, basically you can approach them with, with your data and stuff. And then that way you get like X amount of dollars per 1,000 downloads, which is really good with like bigger podcasts or in big numbers. But if you're like a smaller podcast, even if you're a bigger podcast, but at the beginning, what you want to really go after, they call it the CPA, the cost per acquisition. Those are the ones where you want to do the things like Amazon or Skillshare, where it's like, if you have a small and loyal audience, it's like, if you refer them, use the code amazon.com/let's chat, which doesn't exist, but God, I wish it did. But there's reasons it doesn't. And stuff like that. And then they get a money like that. So that's like a really good way to get a sponsor in the very beginning. One of the best pieces of advice I also do is it's called lying. And tell me more about that. Yeah, you just lie to people and tell them you have more downloads. No. In all honesty, like, offer if you don't have a sponsor, but you're looking to get a sponsor, you want to get your audience used to it. Why not reach out to local businesses or people or charities or podcast friends? Offer them a free slot immediately, just to be like, I'll give you 30 seconds. Give me an audio clip. Then when someone's listening to your show, whether it's a listener or a sponsor, they're going to think that you have sponsorship, because no one knows. I've run tons of promos. No one knows how much I make or don't make on anything. And so that's a great way to start, is just kind of always have this, I call it punching up, like always have your perception be bigger than your actual reality. So like your best thing to do in the beginning is just like allow yourself to let people think you have sponsors before you approach them. So instead of you contacting like a company cold turkey, they listen to your show and then it kicks in. It's like, and it's just like a trailer for another podcast or something like that. Another great one I've been learning about is really about getting creative. It's one, especially if you hit like maybe about the industry standards, usually about like the first 30 days of downloads and stuff like that. And the more metadata you collect through your host site and things like that, and Spotify, Instagram, and Facebook, and your Twitter, it's not all about a download. It's your download plus your social media and all that stuff, which you can kind of get into. Go to a local business, find your area. Like, say you have a niche podcast about bicycles. Well, if you live in Providence and there's a bike shop, why not walk in there and introduce yourself? And if you're not at a place where you feel comfortable asking for money, why don't you ask them for time or service, or ask them if you can run an ad for them? And then hopefully they can pay you. Sponsorships are the ones that everyone wants to get first, but they're kind of the hardest to get. Donations are usually your best bet off the bat, trying to get money from people in the very beginning. Unreadable rant again. They're just full of the best advice. They make it part of their show where they have a thing called like Buy Me Coffee. So when you go to their website, you click on their site, it says Buy Me Coffee. Oh, I'm sorry, no, Buy Me a Drink, because like that's part of their brand, because they like to drink and that's the thing. And you click a little button and it brings you to their Venmo or their PayPal or their Patreon, and you can give them a couple bucks. So like I always think of sponsorships of like through companies, through businesses, through nonprofits, and also through, I consider donation sponsorships basically. Anytime anyone's giving you money, do your thing. I think that's kind of your best bet, is like not trying to jump to the big dogs, to Spotify and mid-roll and try to get into these big programs. Like, you got to start very small in the small podcast. And especially the smaller the town, the better you're in. Like the smaller the community, Like, I think I have more luck in Providence than I would if I lived in New York.
Definitely. I agree with that. Providence is a great town. We've talked about this before. I'm in love with the place. I might be moving there after my kid gets out of high school. Yeah, after my kid gets out of high school, if I haven't, had to flee to another country, then Providence definitely is a cool. And my girlfriend's probably shaking her fist at the screen right now because we don't want to tell Bostonians about how awesome Providence is in fear of a mass migration down there.
Yeah, we're afraid of that too. We definitely that is definitely the fear. But yeah, back to your saying, that's kind of the biggest thing for me is like kind of like been learning like kind of going outside the box and being like, all right, well the standard industry says to do this, but like what stops me from going to a coffee shop and say, "Hi, I do this podcast. Could I do it? Give me a loaf of bread and I'll talk about you," or an Instagram post. Like there's, I mean, at least myself, I'm also open to free products.
Oh yeah,
I love free stuff.
Yeah, I'm not against the free stuff either.
Shops want to sponsor me, I'm totally fine.
I think that's a really creative series of suggestions that you gave, especially the idea about just having someone make a 30-second roll for you just to put on, even if they're paying you or not paying you, just to give the impression that you do have sponsorship.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it gives your listeners and it gives someone because when someone listens to it, most people aren't going to listen to a podcast. But I wonder how much they're getting for that role. Most people don't know or care. It's just you just subconsciously you leveled up by just having an ad, whether it's your friend or like a paid from a business. Someone listens to that and you just come off a little more professional.
Right. Good advice, dude, all around. Okay, so we touched on podcasting networks. When I was listening to the episode, the recording of the roundtable, there seems to be a service called Anchor.
Yes.
And let me cobble my series of thoughts together on this. It seems kind of YouTubey in the fact that if you have enough traffic in Anchor, they will put ads or support you, give you money. Talk about that, please.
Yeah, so I haven't used it myself. They're the company that just got bought by Spotify, so that's why there's a lot of shakiness around them. But basically, they're a host site like a Libsyn that you don't pay for; it's free. And they have a built-in sponsorship program essentially, so you get less. They do everything the same way. It's basically just taking out one step for you, having to say write that email, do those things, and track that down. I like to think of sponsorship like guest booking, where it's like it's fun, it's a puzzle. Be like, oh, who would be right for me? Do, and then I can kind of like automatically do that, and I think it's great. I think it's a wonderful thing. I know there are some, like Blake had brought up, there are some concerns of like them being bought by Spotify, who owns the content. You don't always want the company paying you based off your downloads, being in control of your downloads. There can be like, there could be some, nothing has happened. I'm not saying anything bad of Anchor, but I think people are just wary of people who know a little bit about capitalism can be a little wary of things like that. Like, it's nice to have a third party, but also I'm not against it too. If you're just starting off in your bedroom, like I was like a bunch of years ago, absolutely do it. It is a pain in the ass to switch, but there's no reason to say you can't start in Anchor, start to make a few bucks, kind of build yourself up, and then continue out. But if that's not if you want to have a revenue stream that isn't through Anchor, there's also other ways. There's ways to do it that are a little more work, but it's definitely a way. Like one of the best things, it kind of ties in, is making merch using like a Redbubble or a TeePublic or a TeeFury site where you just get a cut of the money. And then if you can build that up enough, you can go make your own store. But you don't have to put any of your money up front. I think that's better. Like, and Anchor's kind of like that. I think it's good for a starting tool if you don't have the means. It's a great thing for the people who don't have the means to put the money up front, because not even like the 20, 30, 40, how much money is it going to cost to host your podcast? Right. So I think it's definitely a thing. I mean, I'm all for it, but I guess the downside is the if, and then if you ever choose to leave your host site, which I have done once, it's a pain in the ass. But it is doable.
All right. What was interesting, I want to pivot back a little bit to sponsorship. I was listening to Daniel Denvir, on the show, who does the Dig podcast.
Yes. Really seems right, by the way, that his podcast in the magazine that he was Jacobin.
Jacobin.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's really like your market. Like that's
brilliant actually, because Daniel does this real leftist kind of podcast. I've only listened to an episode, but and Jacobin is a leftist magazine, And what he did was he approached them before Jacobin was associated with any podcasts at all and said, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this podcast. I have all this experience in leftist politics and journalism. Do you want to pair with me? Do you want to support me? You want to, and I'll support you. And from what I understand, the Jacobin waited till he got a couple of episodes up. But after that, they were tied together, basically.
Yeah. Have you seen his Patreon too? Like, it's insane.
Well, I have to talk. I have to give Daniel credit. He is the real deal.
Yeah.
The man does 2-hour podcasts. He reads every book. He does copious notes, and I believe that I do good research on every one of the guests that I talk to. But Daniel, he really does really good work, and I can see why he has a fervent base of supporters.
Oh, absolutely. He puts in the work. He puts in the time. And from talking to him from a little bit from there and getting to know him a little bit beforehand, it kind of seemed like a little bit of like anything, just time and luck. I guess that's the trick to life. Find the thing that you would be putting that time of effort into anyway, and then find a way to get money for it. Because I got the sense, I'm like, this is who you would have been regardless of a podcast. like he was going to probably read that book anyway.
Yes, he was going to read the book. He was going to think deeply about the book, consider how it applies in everyday life, how it changes him. Yeah. And
outside the box thinking too, like approach them. I wish I thought of that. Like, why, approach a magazine. And that's what's so creative about this new media of why not find the old guard and be like, how can we work together? And
right.
I can write that down myself.
So we were talking about Patreon and buy me a coffee and merch, but what the theme is having multiple streams of income.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of that's always the goal, right? Like, you I guess it's sponsorship, merch, donations, Patreon. I think those are the three that I could think of, unless one of them that is a little more outside the box that I actually have been kind of more leaning to myself. I always kind of think of podcasting very much like the music industry of how do you make money off a podcast? So I'm a big believer in what I had done is first, when you make a podcast, do every little fucking thing yourself, learn the ins and outs, find out what you like, what you don't like. And when you start finding out there's stuff you don't like to do that you're going to hire out for, why not become that and it's something like the perfect example is editing. If you want to make money off your podcast, become a podcast editor, because that is the thing that nobody wants to do. So maybe start thinking, I think about this as something my business partner and I think about a lot now, have the podcast, but also what about the journeyman? The famous story of the Wrecking Crew is the studio musicians. No one knows their names. They play on every album you ever known, but they're career musicians.
Yeah.
So a blue collar aspect to podcasting as well. So just if you're making a podcast, don't think that's where your income needs to stop. Maybe Let's Chat's not going to make me a revenue where I can leave my job, but being a sound editor, being a consultant, being a booking agent, the cottage industry that sprouts out around it, you could start. So that's another way. I'm also a big fan of a thing I like to do is offering people service for service. Sometimes I don't have the means to get something done, but there's things I can do because I've learned all the skills of podcasting, and some of them I'm really good at, some of them I'm not, and that's when I start paying out. And then I'll be hey, guest spot. I've never done that, but we'll make you. How about we can make you a website, and then maybe you could do this for us or whatever. It doesn't have to be podcast related. Maybe your skill set. My instructor through PRX said that she had teamed up with someone who made her logo art because she was gonna update. She made a resume for them, and it had nothing to do with podcasts. And she just happened to be good at making resumes. And she's like, "I'll give you 2 hours of my time to edit your resume and make a resume if you give me 2 hours of your time to make me some logo."
Yeah.
For service is another a bartering system as well.
Sure. What was interesting, because there were a couple of comedians on the show, on the roundtable, and they were talking about live shows and how that's a moneymaker for them.
I know, and now I guess we'll see if virtual live shows will be the thing, which I think it kind of will be. The Bechdel Cast is wonderful podcast, and they were touring pretty extensively, and they were both comedians and pretty established in their own right prior to the podcast. And they're part. I listened to this. I'm a big fan of the Daily Zeitgeist, so they're on there a lot. They're part of that How Stuff Works Network, which now got wrapped up into iHeartMedia. But that's what they talk about, like doing like the live shows for them. Like, and I think that seems to be a little bit more. I'm wondering, anyone in the chat or yourself curious. It seems like comedy podcasts excel live, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe some other shows. I wonder how that is with other podcasts. I don't know if like The Dig live would do well, but comedy seems to have that built-in like live experience.
Right. I think if you're a musician and if you do something musical,
yes,
that would do really well live too.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the big ones do live. And I think it's cool. I mean, now there's so many different ways. Like, I think we're only maybe a year away for like people like, and maybe also a couple more levels where you do something like this, but you charge $5. You know, maybe that's the future. You get like someone big on there, or like Michelle Obama has a podcast. So now like all of a sudden she's in our world, which, you know, I don't think she's going to come on my show, but
no.
You never know.
And the thing is about live shows too is that you have an opportunity to sell your merch. You have ways of really connecting with people in a real world, face-to-face kind of way.
Oh yeah, and especially at least here in the States, it doesn't look like they will be returning. Hopefully, anytime they should be, but will not be returning anytime soon, unfortunately.
Right.
I wonder too, like if, I guess this is where you look to like the big dogs, like will Joe Rogan or Kevin Smith go on a tour doing drive-in live podcast stuff? Like I'd watch that.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
You get to go to those because you get to meet them, but I'm imagining if I was them, I wouldn't want to be shaking hands with a bunch of strangers right now.
Right. You know, I saw Penn Jillette live during his podcast.
Oh man,
this is years ago. Big guy, really tall guy. It goes without saying, anyone knows Penn Jillette knows he's a tall person. But it was really good watching artists interview, give answers in real time, and they're like quarterbacks in the pocket, right? They're like boxers. You get to see them work, respond, and because it's because podcasts obviously are just an audio medium, but you get to see people do facial gestures. There's so much more to that live show.
Oh, it's everything. I think once we can, I think live podcasts, like you're going to see that more of it. And I bet too, maybe the format changes where it's not just a person talking to another person. Maybe there's like more of a performance element within it. Like why it'd be great to see like I would love to do like a live let's chat, but have like a stand-up come up first, or musician like close the set out, or like especially early days of like especially grunge, like David Cross and stuff like that. Like I'm always a huge fan of taking those genre mashups. So maybe you see like a live podcast tour with a comedian or musician or something like that. I think that would work really well.
You know, I think that's a great way for smaller podcasts to band together in like some kind of weird traveling show. I think that would be, think that'd be a great opportunity.
And there's no reason you can't even do it. Like, I mean, I actually was talking to my producers about, we were thinking about doing one outside. Like, wow, we'll just do it at the park, and then, you know, no one shows up. Who cares? At the very least, we just get to hang out.
Yeah.
Or backyard. Like, you know, I come from the DIY punk world, and I you know, you just, if there's a will, there's a way. Like when you have that idea, nothing will stop you. And sometimes it's good things stop you, because sometimes you realize, all right, I didn't really want it as much as I thought I did. And that's not a bad thing, because it's only 3 hours in the day, because we all have a lot of good ideas. We can only chase so many of them.
Yeah, true enough. So I have a couple of random tricks or facts that I jotted down while listening. And one of the tricks, I think it was once again from Daniel over at the Dig. He does book giveaways to his patrons. Oh my God, giveaways, which I'm not the best, are the most important people. Oh, sorry. Heard something out there. Yeah, giveaways, the thing that people love. I have an author friend, and her Instagram is just book giveaways, and her follower count is insane because people just love free, myself included. Just love free. Yeah, that's something I need to work on myself. But yeah, giveaways are so important. So what Daniel does is that after the interview, he will ask the author for a couple of books, because that way it's not slimy, right? You're not trying to like squeeze a person for books. Oh yeah, and that's classy. I like that. We've done a couple. I had an author on, Daniel Kozu, who's a writer for the Hard Times, and he had a book, and
he asked, he's like, "Can we do a giveaway?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." We had a couple. Everyone else, we did a couple of them. People, and it goes well, and then people take pictures of it, and like, what they spent, $3, and the amount of press they get from it. But from what I got from those people, they were just more happy to see the thing that they wrote in somebody's hands.
Right. All right.
Who actually got it.
In the chat, CH2517 Joan has to go. It was good having you in the chat, Joan.
Thank you so much for coming along. This is so fun.
This has been fantastic. So yeah, man. So next time I have an author on, because I do have authors coming through the YouTube channel, I'm just going to ask them at the end of the interview for a book, for a giveaway. I think that was like blew my mind. Yeah.
They love, and especially too, if you have an author of a certain like level where the publisher is paying for it, they're like, "Oh fuck yeah!" If it's not selling, they're like, "Oh, take 20."
Right. Sure.
I was going to do this thing, if I can actually find it. We were actually just talking to my producers about this. I was like, we should do a giveaway where we just give away stuff from my house I don't want anymore. So, like, I found this old package of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle 3 trading cards.
Right.
So, like, it's a giveaway. Actually, anyone in the chat, first one to claim it, it's yours. We'll send it to you. I'll throw you some Let's Chat merch in there, too. I'm not even kidding. I want them, and then it's a giveaway, and it makes you look good, and you throw a couple stickers in there. I should maybe promote my own merch instead of all the crap on my desk. Crap. Well, we will send you some of these too. They're actual merch. And if you like the Turtles 3 movie, that for some reason, I don't know how I have these.
Is that the slime movie?
No, this is the worst one. The one after that, when they go back to the China, maybe. It's bad. It's really. I was a kid. I saw it as a child and thought it was bad.
Oh, that's another level of bad right there. Yeah. So one of the things I heard too, which resonated with my experience, is that famous guests do not necessarily give you a lot of traffic.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I heard that too. I don't know. I guess. I mean, the expert said it. I still didn't believe it. I was like, "Are you sure?" They don't maybe result in maybe specifically like a number of downloads per episode, but I do think there's value in the sense that then you can then go right to someone else and be like, "I had this person on."
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't mean you're going to get someone famous. Like, I guess I think the point I'm hoping they were trying to make is like, don't try to get someone on just for the sake of their fame,
right?
Because the more famous, they're not going to promote it. And you know what? And someone comes on your show, it's not their responsibility, so that's totally fine. If they're famous because you want to talk to them, like I don't know if I've ever talked to anyone who's famous, but famous in our circles,
right?
Or been around famous people. But yeah, you know, it is funny. You'll notice like the bigger names don't really draw in versus like I had Griffin Newman on, who's not famous-ish. I don't know. He's on The Tick on Amazon, which got canceled, but he's a very popular Blank Check podcast. So I wouldn't call him famous. My parents wouldn't know who he is. Like he's not like Tom Cruise or anything. But I got a lot of traffic for him because he's super, super involved in the communities. But the famous people, the names I had on who didn't have anything to do with their communities, like no traffic at all.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
Oh, cool. But I mean, it was for me personally, it was more like I just wanted to talk to this person because they did this thing. It wasn't like a fame thing. But yeah, that is funny too. And if you're listening to this, like me thinking like, I don't know, like I'll tell you right now, I subscribe to WTF with Mark Maron and a lot of the big ones. And there's a lot of times now that I scroll by some really big names that I don't listen to because I want to listen to the latest like Office Ladies or like Cinema Recall or like a no-name podcast first, like whatever famous person was on WTF.
Yeah, I'll tell you this about Barron is that with the passing of his girlfriend and everything like that, I mean, I just wanted to check in and see how he was doing. You know, I follow him on Instagram. You know, it was more, and that's the power of relationship, isn't it?
Well, I feel like I know him. Like I've listened to hundreds of hours of his voice.
Hundreds. I've seen him live 100 times. My girlfriend and I were in LA before the apocalypse started, and we saw him in the Comedy Store, close up, really close. And you know, I'd heard most of the jokes he had done, you know, because he was working, you know, banging out some material. But it was just great. It was magical. That's what it was.
He's like our pod dad.
Oh yeah. True enough.
Especially as you got to the point, I've had periods in my life where I would even listen to the intros.
Yep.
And that's podcasting, like you come, like I started listening, like maybe you listen to Mark Maron because he had Obama on, but then you end up liking Mark Maron and then you come back for somebody else. And I guess that's kind of how it starts. You just, at some point, the host becomes more valuable than the guest.
I would agree, especially when they have a lot of life experiences and they reveal parts of themselves.
The vulnerability.
Vulnerability. And dude, there are moments within the last couple of weeks of the podcast, like I said, after his girlfriend passed on, and she died horribly too. I mean,
so sad,
really tragic. So my heart just went out to the guy.
Or even Joe Rogan, who gets a lot of shit from a lot of people from different levels or whatever. But I mean, I love the show. I don't listen to every episode, but I've listened to enough. I've literally listened to that man cry more than once.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that Joe Rogan kind of gets looked over because I think of the outward machismo kind of, maybe sometimes some shitty alt-right people get on his show that I don't like either. But I've listened literally in tears talking about a dog of his that's passed. You know, like when you're attacking someone who likes a podcast, you're not attacking. It's different. There's an emotional connection. Like you connect to these people you don't know the reasons. I don't know why, but there's something about that person that makes you feel like you know them and you care. Like I got so sad when I heard his girlfriend died. I was like, Mark Maron, but I felt like it was a friend of mine who lost I have empathy. I feel bad for people, especially people I care about.
Oh, yeah. Neil from the chat, Neil604 Atheist, says he just finished watching The Tick and loved it.
It's so fucking good. Neil, you're so right.
Dude, you should plug that episode that had him, who had Arthur on. What number episode, or when was it out?
Oh, God, that must have been like 4 or 5. Maybe that's like 5 or 6 episodes back. It was pretty recently. It was during the quarantine. And he was the nicest human being that you could possibly a quick side of it. So that first Saturday when everything went to hell with the virus, we were set to record. Poor guy's mom thought she had corona, but she couldn't get tested yet. I had to work that whole week. It was a terrible day. My daughter was sick. We start recording. My daughter starts vomiting a couple of times. So we did about 30 minutes. I had to cancel, and he goes, "Hey man, do you want me just to come back another time?" And I was like, "Oh, thank you." I was just so tired. And I was like, all right, whatever. He was so nice to come on. I got a 30-minute interview out of it. We're fine. And then a couple of weeks later, he wrote back. He's like, "Hey, man, I'm so sorry. Blah, blah, blah. Let's do it again." He came back. He gave me an hour and a half of his time and was super open, super vulnerable. We talked about The Tick. We talked about Blank Check. We talked about everything. My brother, of all people, gave me the highest compliment. He said it was like an NPR podcast. It was probably it was one of the most proud moments I've ever had for doing the show because I'm such a blankie. And I thought The Tick was fantastic. I don't know if you had watched it, but it was one of the best portrayals of like mental illness I've ever seen in television, which I thought his portrayal of Griffin was like, And that thing, I wasn't going after him because he was a famo. It was like, I'm a fanatic of Blank Check. I'm a fanatic of Tick. I was like, I want to talk to Griffin. I actually tried. That took 4 years to set up, and it happened. So it was pretty cool.
All right. So Neil was saying that he collected the comics back in the day. Yeah, my
nice, Neil. Nice.
I was back because I'm from Boston, and Ben Edlund is from Carver, which is a suburb of Boston. I was dating the inker, Max. I'm bisexual, so I was dating the inker there. I guess I have to explain that because we live in a heteronormative kind of society. Yeah. But yeah, man, I hung out with Ben maybe a couple of times, and with my boyfriend because he was working on The Tick and everything. But it was great guy, and I really enjoyed those times. Yeah,
I bet you can get Ben on this channel.
I would like to. Believe me, I have a list. You must have a list of people you want on your stuff, that you want to talk to.
Yeah, the more you want that guest. There's a few. We had about a good 5 or 6 episodes. I had a 5-episode run recently, and I think it's still happening. Where I got 2 of the people that there are people that are on that list. It was Benny Horowitz and Griffin Newman. They happened back to back, and they were on my list for 4 or 5 years. I have periodically had always been just scanning, trying, and then sometimes magic just happens and you get the yes. So yeah, those I totally get it. Yeah, Ben Edlund, definitely another one too. Oh my god, that guy's insane. Yeah,
incredibly talented. He shows up everywhere, and you won't know it until you look at the producer credits.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, that's Ben. That's what he's doing now. Yeah.
owned all his own stuff, like took the Lucas mentality and be like, I'm going to own my stuff, and like kind of knowing your own worth and your value, which is incredible.
Right. Yeah. So we should talk about, and you know what, Neil, I will ask him. I'll talk to Chris after the show, and we'll see if he's interested. And I'll hook you guys up maybe on Facebook together. But I wanted, we're in COVID-19. I talked to someone from New Zealand a few days ago. I talked to someone, Harley Neville, who's an actor, producer over in New Zealand. I talked with Paul Duncan, who is a satirist who writes for the Out and About last night. He's over in England right now. And now today, and they shared their COVID-19 stories. They haven't been infected with it, but of course they've been affected by the pandemic. And now, just to catch everyone up, you're in quarantine. You are in quarantine. What's going on, dude?
So I'm a healthcare worker. I work at a hospital, but I don't think I have it. Fortunately, I was having fatigue, so we're just being extra cautious. So I'm in quarantine, and then I'm supposed to see my PCP today as well. I've been tested, but because of the huge spike in testing and numbers and the backup, it's just a matter of it taking longer to get your results. So, I mean, literally, so I get tested about weekly just because I can, because I'm a healthcare worker. I try to go weekly. And usually it's about 2 to 4 days. In circumstances, it's usually, you can get what they call asymptomatic rapid testing, which is about 30 minutes, which is what I was trying to get signed up for, was for rapid testing. And it does not exist at the moment because of, well, the guy, the federal government is just fucking us over every second they can, essentially, with lack of money for these things. So even like now for people like me or people working in the grocery store, it's going to be up to a week. I got tested on Tuesday, and weekends don't count. So I have to hide for a whole week from my family and which, it sucks for me. It sucks for my family. It sucks for my wife, like the workload. And I'm fortunate because I don't work an hourly job. At least I can work remotely. I'm feeling better, so I'll be back at work tomorrow. But like,
oh, that's great.
But like, there's so many like tentacles that go within it where it just sucks. Like, why can't we? Yeah. So essentially, if I had gotten a rapid test, which was available last week, but not this week, I wouldn't be in quarantine, but I have to now wait up until I get that call just for the safety of why I don't think I have it. God forbid I do. Like, I don't want to be around my 3-year-old, and I live in a multi-generational household. I work in a hospital. I'm what you would call a contagion. So like, if I get it, like if certain people get it, it's bad, but you might give it to 1 or 2 people. But I'm one of those people that could be giving it to upwards of hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Around a lot of people. So I take it very seriously. So I'm more cautious than most. So fingers crossed I don't have it. But yeah, it sucks. And like, thank God I have an amazing wife and in-laws and parents and great support system around me. And it's terrible. It sucks. And the worst part is, when I'm sure anyone listening to the same thing, it's like, it's unavoidable. This is all so unavoidable. Even 2 days is like annoying, but you can make work. But like 6 to 10 days is ridiculous. Now, I mean, you just have to flash forward to what happens to someone as wait till September. What about a teacher or a student who has the sniffles? Because I've been around children. They're all sick. Yeah. That's 2 weeks. I mean, I think things will change. I'm in Rhode Island, so I know things are going to get a little bit better. And I know they're working towards having the more increased rapid testing. I think it sounded like there's a switch from like who's doing the testing, which kind of slowed things down too. But yeah, I don't have to go off on the anti-mask people, but thank you.
There's just so much to talk about, a rant about regarding those folks. Well, it sounds like you're okay.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And it sucks. It's like the thing where it's like the best case scenario is this is just a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Unnecessary pain, and like I feel like I get the best of it because I don't. My wife has to pick up she has a full-time job and she works from home, and we have a 3-year-old, so she has to do all that and then do all that stuff. But I mean, I do feel fortunate. I don't. I was on vacation for about a week and a half too. So I purposely didn't go into my office for the week after I came back. So I'm hyper vigilant. So God forbid if I do have it, which I don't think I did, I would have, if I did spread it, it would be very minimally because I take it extremely seriously. And I kind of wish everyone else would. Like, it's actually really not that hard. The mask is not that big a deal. I don't want people 6 feet near me. Before this happened, I was like, stay the fuck away from me anyway. And I know how to use technology.
Right.
hardest thing about being around your kids is like,
yeah, especially at 3 years old, right?
and they don't understand. And
they don't
I think
understand.
I'd be able to see her outside. So that would be nice.
Sure.
Yeah, it just, I mean, this is essentially, we think of fascism of what it is and why obviously it is happening, but this is also what fascism is. It's like you're not able to have products available to you that should be available to you. There's no reason that every citizen in America should not have home access to like a 2-minute, like in Germany, like a 2-minute test before you walk into a building. There's zero reason. And that's essentially what it is. We are now not having access to the things we need. Like I worked in a hospital in the pandemic when we were not allowed to use PPE. And I also lived in Providence where I had to watch because there wasn't enough of it. So they had to separate it. So I'm outpatient. I don't work in the unit. So I wasn't, it had to come down.
Yeah.
And you see the fucking stuff happens at like here in Providence. We had the National Guard essentially protecting the mall and spending millions of dollars on peaceful protests, which I do believe in like protecting, and they go off the numbers of how much they're spending on the military. And like, I can't have a 7-cent mask. One off cover enough PPE for 18 people or something like that for like 6 months. I don't have the number. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Like before people get into ideological arguments, like when we're talking about these things like defund the police, it's at the end of the day, it's really boring information. It's just allocating funds from here to there. So people like you and me and everyone can have what we need when we need it instead of like, I don't know, does Providence, the police department, need to have a fucking submarine? I don't think they do. I just made that up.
I don't think they do, dude. No. Well, once again, talking with, especially with Paul, who's over in England, but he works on a yacht. He's a captain of a private yacht. And cool. But he has rapid testing on his yacht. So whenever you go on, he has rapid testing. And it's so ridiculous that some people from, especially those in, like I said, in countries, not ours, have the resources, and we don't.
We have the resources. We're just not dealing them out.
You're right. You're totally right. We just aren't utilizing them properly.
The governor of Maryland was using the National Guard to protect it because the Trump administration has been coming in, taking city, states, and towns supplies and then selling them to the rich donors. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to make everything a political thing, and I guess you can guess where I stand on my opinion of it, but like, that fucks over everyone. Like, if you want to open schools in September, there's a way to do it. Just have everyone get rapid tests as they enter the building. It's a simple solution, and it's really frustrating that. And then you get that, and like, I'm complaining because it's like stuck in my house and I have everything good, but like, this sucks. I should not have to be going through this inconvenience, and I know it's an inconvenience, but I should not have to go through it, and neither should you, and neither should anybody. Neither should the clerk, neither should the janitors. Like, all these people like us who like have had these jobs that all of a sudden now we have an occupational hazard that we never signed up for, that affects our life in ways that are just at any moment. We all have to be willing and able to jump up just to dip out of life for 2 weeks and drop everything, and you have no choice. And I'm fortunate. I have paid time off, but it's not like your company is going to be like, here, don't worry about it. That means I don't get a vacation this year, essentially, which I'm not complaining, but it's the reality.
Right. So, dude, we're heading towards the end of our time. The question, you've been on the show enough times. I like to ask the question, is there something you wanted me to ask you, but I didn't get around to? Was there a topic you wanted to touch on that we didn't explore fully?
I want to iTunes and how it's fucking useless. And even though it's in my bio, you only do that for perception. Getting in the iTunes charts, like the new whatever, I've been on iTunes charts. I have so many friends. iTunes is complete bullshit. It can be gamed. It's literally you can purchase your way in. It will not result in downloads. It doesn't do anything. If you look at any podcast and we'll say which is the most popular, those are all inaccurate to anyone who has a podcast. iTunes, even though for so long it was our central figurehead, it's honestly utter shit show, waste of time, and don't put any of your time or effort into it. You could be number one on iTunes and have no downloads, and you could have 1 million downloads. It is the thing that myself and everyone spends way too much time and energy into. Like, how to get on the old iTunes chart. Like, there's so many proven ways where you can just bug the algorithm or pay money. It's useless. It doesn't turn into any dollars or money. Honestly, your most success, I'll have more value appearing on your YouTube show than I would be on having an iTunes top 100 comedy podcast right now.
Wow.
Which doesn't right because iTunes, I don't understand why iTunes they have this whole, which is also why you're seeing Spotify and all these other industries kind of coming and building their own beautiful thing. So just don't waste your time in iTunes. That's the best advice. Don't waste your time in iTunes, and work hard, be nice, and all that stuff. And yes, the opportunities you want to, and the power of no. When to say no.
Well, dude, this has been a freaking incredible conversation. I learned a lot. I'm sure anyone who is watching or will be watching the recording of this live event will learn something from this. Where can people find you?
Well, thank you so much. We're gonna get you back on that again too. I know it's been a few years. This has been fun. So we're everything on the social media is at Let's Chat Podcast. Another good tip if you're just starting out, if you can get before you pick your show title, if you can get the big 3 social media you're going to focus on one name, that's your best bet. That's the best part of starting early that I get because I have Let's Chat Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and everything. But we also have a website, which is also another big tip. Have a website, no matter how big, how small, have a central place where everyone can find you. Mine is letschatpodcast.net. My amazing business partner, producer, Brianna of Benjamin Design made it for us. I can't thank her enough for it. And you can hire her. We also have started Let's Chat podcast services. Anything you talked about stuff today, if you want to hire out, you can hire out to myself and with Let's Chat podcast services and my team with Will, Mike, Chris, and Brianna. We do it all. So feel free to reach out to us.
Dude, once again, this has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. This has made quarantine much more fun because today was the first day I started to feel better. I was like, I'm now bored. I don't know what to do in my room.
Right. Hey, I want to say thanks to everyone in the chat, everyone who's watching on Facebook. Thanks for coming on. And thanks for everyone engaging with us. This has been a lot of fun.
Let us know, and we'll send you some Let's Chat merch as well.
All right. Take care, everyone. Be safe.